we're already on the subject of Brit bongers, so it's not that much out of our way, you know. We'll get back to this later, I think. Okay, so here's a story, right? Trans people in the UK are in a genuine state of crisis, and it's about time people in other countries woke up to it and started treating it as such. So, for those of you who aren't like in the well, do you want me to do a Cockney accent? Would that be better? I think it would be worse, to be 100% honest with you. Um, but uh, um, the issue is here. Trans people in the UK tend to be pretty marginalized, to say the least. There's I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe one of my Britbongers in chat can give me some insight into this. But for whatever reason, the UK seems especially prone towards turfiness and transphobia. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. But there's been a general rise in these groups that are opposed to trans people, and it's not really clear why. But they tend to be of the opinion that trans women, in particular, are a big problem, and that in having trans women in women's spaces is men in some way encroaching on their sacred space. Um, Hello, Lost Sue. I appreciate you coming back. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We're talking about transphobia in the UK. Um, so there's like this weird correlation, and I'm not entirely sure. Well, yeah, it's because of turfs, but why are there so many turfs um, in the UK? We have a problem with turfs in the media and the government. Hello, Universal Discourse. Great seeing you again. I was lurking in your stream for a while last night while I was editing some of the highlights from my stream. It was nice watching you talk and interact with your community too. Happy Halloween to you as well. Um, they wanted feminists and didn't check which kind of feminists they took in. True, true. Okay, you know what? That's a good point, because a lot of TERFs tend to portray themselves as genuinely. TERFs tend to take on concern trolling feminist personas, like, oh, I'm a feminist, I'm just concerned about this one aspect of trans people, you know? But if you start digging into that for a lot of TERFs, it winds up just being like they don't really accept or want to associate with trans people. And it's generally like a not great thing. The indigenous side of Twitch has shown up. Hell yeah, I'm here for that. The government doesn't actually care what anyone thinks. They just want you to think they care. Well, yeah, but that's like most governments, you know? Um, but here's the thing. So this is all kind of being ignited by the BBC no bias rules that just went into effect. The Director General, Tim Davie. By the way, The Guardian, also an extremely transphobic publication. Both The Guardian and the BBC tend to have this relationship with trans people where they will support them when it is convenient, but then as soon as it becomes, even a modicum of work, they will throw trans people under the bus. And you can see that very much in these no bias rules. So basically, the BBC was like, hey, we support LGBT people. If you want to go to a pride march and you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, by all means, go do that. But if you want to support trans people by going to a pride march, well, that's a little too controversial for us. So you can't do that. So we'll dive into this in a little bit more detail here. The BBC Director General Tim Davie introduced the rules on Thursday. They are designed to shore up the public perception of BBC impartiality following long running criticism pushed by right wing media outlets about the alleged biases of corporation staff. Universal Discourse used to write for The Guardian, among others, as a journalist. That's exactly how they are. Yeah. It's something that's really frustrating to me because, like, I generally consider The Guardian a pretty decent outlet when it comes to reporting the news. But when it comes to these trans issues, they have just a very, very apparent bias against trans people. In addition to strict new social media guidelines, Davie introduced a ban on broadcaster news reporters taking part in public demonstrations or gatherings about controversial issues, even when not marching under identifiable BBC banner. The guideline states that judgment is required as to what issues are controversial with regard to marches or demonstrations, though it should be assumed most marches are contentious to some degree or another. Journalists in BBC newsrooms across the UK told The Guardian that managers had informed them that while pride marches were not specifically mentioned by the guidelines, journalists would be stopped from attending due to the new rules. BBC sources did not dispute this, but said interpretations of the rules would be at the discretion of local managers. They emphasized that there was no explicit ban on pride marches in the rules. BBC employees not working in the news or current affairs divisions would still be able to take place in public marches and protests. One BBC journalist said their manager had been told that growing media and political opposition to trans rights in the UK meant public LGBT pride events were now more likely to count as controversial events, meaning that they would not be able to attend even in a personal capacity. Managers also held up Black Lives Matter marches as an example of protests that would be banned for news staff, even in their spare time. BBC Northern Ireland pulled its employees from taking part in a Belfast Pride last year after politicians raised concerns that it breached impartiality rules by implicitly endorsing same-sex marriage. The same year, however, the BBC's entertainment arm spent a substantial sum to launch RuPaul's Drag Race UK with a float at Manchester Pride. So this is like an ongoing thing where let's see. This has been an ongoing thing where when it's convenient or when they'll get money for doing it, they will 100% support trans and lesbian and gay people. But if it might lose them money, they're not willing to support that. And the more controversial a topic is on social media, the more likely they are to maybe lose money. So a lot of this tends to be a position to cover their own butt by, in essence, limiting the speech of their employees in order to cater to bigots. Like, like lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people work in the BBC, right? So why should it be seen as bias for these people to participate in events that are meant to celebrate their identities? Like, it's not controversial for a BBC journalist to like go to an Anglo-Saxon culture day. I don't know what Polish culture celebrations. Do you guys have those? I don't know, like whatever, but like ethnic celebrations, right? Because that's part of your identity. But it's too controversial if you're gay or trans, apparently. That is apparently a bridge too far in the UK these days. Here's some clarifications here. BBC staff have been banned from attending LGBT pride events, and they were told they could be suspended if they breached the new rules. The head of editorial policy and standards took the decision on Wednesday. It is understood senior management is concerned about the BBC being seen to take a side in the debate around trans issues and has bracketed LGBT prides as political alongside the likes of Black Lives Matter protests. So, like, I understand if you're out there and you're watching and you're like, hey, obviously they're a news organization, they want to be unbiased. What's wrong with that? Well, part of what's wrong with that is you can kind of see this in like climate change, the climate change discourse circa like 2000, the early 2000s, mid 2000s, right? Like people would be like, well, on one side, 98% of the world's scientists agree that global warming is a process that is happening. But on the other side, we have this one scientist who says that global warming isn't happening. We're going to give you each 30 minutes to present your case. Like that. This is the kind of non-biasedness that the BBC is claiming in this certain scenario, right? Like that it's not like an equal thing. Like bigots are a small minority of people. The vast majority of people support trans issues. So why are we trying to act like there is equal validity to being against trans people and being for trans people, Yeah, people have been accusing the BBC and The Guardian for being too left-wing for like 6 years straight. Yeah, I mean, like, the issue is conservatives are always going to accuse media outlets of being biased in against their positions because conservatives are full of Karens who rush to the manager and complain a lot, and B, they understand that by leveraging that power they can shift the discourse in their favor. And really, conservatives are almost always in the minority of positions. Like in the United States, if you're conservative, you have to understand that like literally if all registered Democrats showed up and all registered Republicans showed up in an election, like you would be dwarfed by like 3-1. Like it's not even close. Not even close, by the way. But like we act like both sides have equal validity. But let's see. Let's read on here. It only applies to people in the BBC who are expected to be politically neutral, such as current affairs. One staffer at BBC Manchester was told they shouldn't be involved in Manchester Pride on a call today. Others in BBC told very different. It's clear this has created a mess. Some BBC staff in mentions saying this isn't what they were told. I asked the BBC press office today if staff could be suspended or given a warning for attending Pride under the new rules, and they repeatedly did not deny it. Asked for clarity on confusion, BBC said Pride is fine if it is seen as a celebration, but if the trans issue, as it was described, is involved, then it passes as a protest, and news and current affairs staff should not attend. So, like, literally it's about trans people here in this case, and I think part of what we need to understand as people who consume the news is that a lot of people consume the news and they think like news and history and a bunch of different like academic fields or informational based fields are unbiased or should be unbiased, objective reporting. Here's the issue. Yeah, the issue is that trans people in this case are allowed to exist. But also, furthermore, the issue is like... I totally lost my train of thought because I looked at chat for a split second. But part of this is that people are trying to claim that historical sources, news reporters, etc., have always been unbiased, or like that is some standard to strive towards. Here's the truth. No media outlet is unbiased. No like historical source is unbiased. Everyone has their own agenda. Everyone has their own interests that they're catering to, even if they're trying to be non-biased. Because often what non-biased means, or unbiased means rather, is that you are catering to a status quo. You're catering to a certain point of view. It's just that that certain point of view tends to be the most widely accepted one, so it comes off as unbiased, right? However, I think that we need to be more mature in the way that we consume news and media and information, especially given that we're living through the information age. You know, like we're now constantly surrounded by a million different news sources, and we need to be able to develop the skills to recognize that these news sources all have different biases, different agendas, and here's the secret. It's okay if they have biases and agendas. That's okay. It's actually okay for news to be unbiased, as long as we have the skills necessary to be able to disentangle that bias from their reporting. Because here's something that I think we all need to understand. When we aren't on our guard for bias in media, we just internalize the status quo. So when you're reading The Guardian thinking that they're reporting just the facts, you need to understand that you only think that they're stating just the facts because you agree with them. This is the entire thing with conservatives and like Fox News. The issue is that we need to get to a place where like our news outlets are upfront with their biases. That's why, for example, I appreciate the Young Turks, even though I don't necessarily agree with everything that they talk about on their program. But I appreciate them because they are upfront with their biases. And that means that I know where their interpretations of different news stories are coming from. I know what their political angle is. And the other issue is that you can be biased while reporting facts. And that's part of my issue with Fox News, is that often Fox News is simply biased without presenting actual factual information. There will just be non-stories like these Hunter Biden documents where they try and make it seem like there's some deep state conspiracy when nothing is actually happening. They try and make it seem like Joe Biden is going to come and take your guns, when actually Joe Biden has no such policy to do anything remotely like that. It's the same with like how Fox News talked about how Obama was going to use FEMA powers to make everyone live in hobbit homes. You know, like I have no problem with outlets being biased as long as they are upfront with their biases and what their agenda is, and they're not presenting incorrect information. You can't really compare U.S. MSM to European, completely different ballgame. Oh, true. There is it's very different depending on where you go. Like, for example, I consider Al Jazeera to be a relatively unbiased news source. Like, they're generally reporting facts and in a way that I can perceive as something like stripped down factual information with some pretty good analysis. However, you also have to understand that Al Jazeera does have political biases towards pushing their foreign policy agendas. It's just that doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with individual stories that they might put out. And I think that that's okay. We need to learn better how to navigate this political space. Guys, and here, just as like a personal reference here, I had one class on media literacy throughout my entire time in schooling. And I have a degree. I have a university degree. I had one class on media literacy. And you know when that class was? It was when I was in middle school. I was in middle school and we had like one semester, one quarter of the year with 1 hour every couple days about how to figure out it, like the biases of a source. And I still think about that class today because I think a lot of people didn't even get that kind of an education, right? And I don't consider what I got even close to being sufficient for most people. Um, so what I'm saying is the BBC here is showing its ass and showing its bias, but it's doing so in an attempt to tell the UK consumers of its its news media that they are unbiased. And I think that you should believe people when they tell you what they are. And this policy by the BBC tells you exactly what they are and what they're doing and what their bias is on this particular issue. Here we call it English literacy. I can't tell if that's a joke or if that's serious. Your dry Brit-bong humor is hard for me to parse. Um, Gosh, you know what? We might as well talk about more UK